Hello. Good evening, everyone. Today is May 13th, and the time is 2:13 p.m. and welcome to the stream, guys. Today we're gonna play. कल हमने Alan Wake खेला था. कल Alan Wake हमने Alan Wake की summary वाली वीडियो नहीं देखी थी, पूरी नहीं की थी. We will continue that afterwards, but yeah, let's continue that right now. अभी करते हैं continue उसको. And afterwards थोड़ा टाइम बचा तो हम सेनुआ सैक्रिफाइस खेलेंगे, क्योंकि सेनुआ सैक्रिफाइस का सेकंड पार्ट भी आने वाला है इसी साल. शायद मई के एंड तक आएगा. नहीं, मई के एंड तक नहीं, आने वाला है, इस साल आएगा. And hopefully we'll buy that game and play it on stream. But yes, for now, let's watch that video that we were watching yesterday. So we were watching next thing. So yes, let's start. Let's continue with the video. ये कल हम देख रहे थे वीडियो इसमें. Yes.
Maybe. You look like me, you handsome devil. The diver was a beloved character I played in one of my films.
Initiation.
I'm a filmmaker, a celebrated author.
Actor who is playing Detective Alex Casey in the TV adaptation of Alan's novels. Alan projects himself into the TV again, and Alan remarks that Casey looks exactly as he'd imagined him to look. They then play a clip from the show Murder Case Casey.
This city was an old scar that refused to heal. The rain made it fester. It needed the sun, but there was only the night. I was tired. Insomnia covered me like a plastic film. I was watching the world through a rain-slick window, my own reflection haunting the view. I was trying to track down a missing writer. My only clue was a table lamp, shaped like an angel, the only thing to shed light on this sordid mystery.
Alan tries to ask about the lamp, and the lights flicker. Alan once again has to try and escape the TV studio. This time he isn't stopped by the dark presence. Instead, he meets the janitor, a man called Ati. Ati keeps calling Alan Tom, and he explains rather cryptically that there's something for him in the basement, a shoebox, a tool to help him build his own exit. Sure enough, in the basement, Alan finds what he was looking for, a lamp shaped like an angel which allowed him to shift the environment around him by using a light source. What's more is that this lamp is the one that the clicker was cut from. Alan finds a TV showing a past memory that shows himself writing. It shows himself descending further and further into mad ramblings about having written many failed attempts to get out of the dark place, but everything he creates is twisted by the dark presence. However, every word he writes is one step closer to a way out, and this inspires him to keep going. He emerges from the TV studio building and onto the street. Alan is in what appears to be New York City, or rather Alan's mental manifestation of it, the dark place. He hears a phone ringing. On the other line is a man who mentions Caldera Street Station, then the line goes dead. But Alan spots a subway pass on the ground. Seeing a bright light at the end of an alleyway, Alan checks it out and he meets New York Police Department detective Alex Casey, the fictional character from his stories. Casey says that he's been looking into a murder, that a cult are murdering people, copycatting the methods of the murders written in a manuscript Casey claims was written by Alan. Casey thinks that Alan may be the cult's leader. Casey hears a commotion around the corner and goes to investigate, but he is killed by the dark presence. A vision of Casey mentions that he remembers dying in that alley in a dream he'd had. He also mentions that it would just keep killing him there, loop by loop. Casey dying reminds Alan of the fate of Casey in his books. Alan feels like he is now the detective. Now armed with a gun and flashlight like the good old days of 2010, Alan uses his angel lamp and manages to access a series of rooftops. In a room, he meets Sheriff Tim Breaker. Breaker seems to recognize Alan, but Alan cannot remember him. This is a result of the loops that Alan has been subjected to. Sheriff Breaker has been trying to find out and theorize about the origins of Mr. Door, but more on him a bit later. Alan uses his new lamp device to open up an entrance to Caldera Street Station. Inside, Alan finds what are called echoes, the ghost of his fictional detective that would give him inspiration on which direction to take the story. With a location, along with a story thread, Alan had a narrative to follow, and it was Detective Casey looking for a missing FBI agent while on the trail of a murder cult called the Cult of the Word. Alan uses these story threads to rewrite reality in specific locations. He follows a blood trail down a subway tunnel and he eventually arrives at his next location, a collapsed tunnel. Alan finds another echo to use as an inspiration and sees an image of two police officers who found the FBI agent. They're worried about the danger the cult poses. The officers say that they heard Alan is the cult's leader. A different echo is of Casey speaking to someone who appears to resemble Tammy Booker, who says that there is more than one urban legend about the Cult of the Word. One is that they used the train tunnels for their ritual sacrifices. Another is that the cult reenacted murder scenes from Alan's books, and that Wake is involved under a false identity known as Mr. Scratch, the name for the devil himself. Alan goes with the murder cult angle, and the scene once again changes. He spots an Alex Casey novel on an altar, almost as if it's a holy book. Further down the tunnels, Alan comes across a derailed train car. Another perfect location for the plot. An echo gives him another idea. It gets darker. The cult would track down a mystic group that called themselves Torchbearers who lived in the tunnels. They locked them up in the derailed subway car, doused it with fuel, and set it alight, burning them alive. Using it, Alan brings the scene to life. It's very dark writing, but it's perfect for the tone he's aiming for. Finally, Alan finds a fourth scene, the end of the line. A spot where Alan could elaborate further about the cult murdering the Torchbearers and invading their holy place. An echo gives him his story thread. It's mentioned that the missing FBI agent had seen something at the scene which had made him run away. Casey suggests a summoning ritual. So, Alan uses that for his story. Going back to the collapsed tunnel, Alan is now able to unblock the collapsed tunnel and proceeds to travel through it to the murder site. However, he is chased by the dark presence. He evades it though and makes it to a safe haven. Heading down the tunnel for real this time, Alan is chased once more, but makes it through the tunnels. He spots Nightingale on a sacrificial altar of sorts. He goes to grab Nightingale's heart, but it disappears. Alan then sees visions of Saga Anderson as she's in the overlap, and this is the moment directly after Saga defeated Nightingale in the overlap. Outside, an apartment block, Parliament Tower, appears as a result of Alan feeling closer to home. The dark place is being altered due to Alan remembering things from the real world again. Heading all the way back through the subway tunnels, Alan speaks to the mysterious person on the phone again. He tells Alan that he needs to make sure Alice got out of the dark place, that Scratch can manifest as Alan's double, and then the line cuts out again. Alan heads into Parliament Tower. Entering the apartment, he is greeted by a barrage of camera flashes, almost as if Alice was trying to capture a photo of something very specific. Throughout his time walking around the apartment, it appears that Alice was being tormented by something or someone. She was working on an exhibition of some sort as well. she also captured a photo of Mr. Scratch. The door to Alan's study is locked. He remarks on a symbol he's not seen before being on the door itself. Alan finds a memory card belonging to Alice and he plays it on her camera.
When I was younger, photography was everything to me.
950.
I moved to New York thinking I'd make it as an artist.
He goes into his writer's room and finds that there's no one writing. In fact, Alan himself is there, but he's dead. He's been shot in the head. He picks up a page and on it, "Return with Alan Wake" scratched out. Alan is then killed by the dark presence again. He wakes up in his writing room again. Alan remembers the page with "Return" written on it. He remarks that he doesn't remember writing it, but that it felt important, and he needs to find it. He wasn't able to escape using the first draft of Initiation, so it's time to work on the second draft, the sequel to the previous story, following the same murder cult. So Alan sits down at his typewriter to start work on his second draft of the story, with the aim being to reach Parliament Tower by using another murder site. His hope was also to stop Scratch from hurting Alice. Alan finds himself once again at the start of his story at the TV studio. Projecting himself into the TV once again, Alan is pulled into a musical based on his life, featuring the music of the old gods of Asgard. He navigates the various set pieces, hearing about his life, journey as a writer and his works on Alex Casey, his trip to Bright Falls and his eventual plummet into the dark place. Alan also has to fight against the Taken. When all that is over, Alan finds himself in an empty TV studio and can now escape, which he does, straight back out again into his version of New York City. Another phone call. The mystery man asks Alan about how much he remembers. Alan responds by saying that he remembers that Alice is in danger, that Scratch is reaching out to Alice, and that there's another manuscript, "Return." The man tells Alan to meet him at the Ocean View Hotel, and he's left a room key for him. Arriving, Alan discovers that he can't enter the hotel the normal way, as the entrance is simply a looping hallway, so he uses his lamp and traverses more rooftops until he reaches the rooftop of the hotel. Inside a room, Alan finds a projector, and he uses it to enter a screen. Inside, he comes face to face with the mystery man, who is none other than Thomas Zane. Yep, Tom, after all that time, seems to be still trapped in the dark place.
Welcome to the House of Zane.
The poet. The diver. You look like me. How the hell?
Or maybe you look like me, you handsome
Thomas
devil.
Zane.
The diver was a beloved character I played in one of my films. I'm a filmmaker, a celebrated auteur.
I need answers. Why is Return so important? What?
Al, you always get worked up like this. Come on, I'll fix you a drink. We're in this together. Two artists collaborating, remember? Crafting the keys to our escape. Your magnum opus, Return, and its companion piece, my film. Sharing our life-altering visions, a melding of higher minds. Dreaming up our transcendental work of art. Here, in this room.
Tom tells Alan that Alice is safe back in the real New York, but that Scratch is reaching out to her through an overlap, and that Return is the key to escaping the dark place, not Initiation. He tells Alan the murder site he's looking for is there in the hotel. All of a sudden, Tom and Alan see someone on the TV. It's Jesse Faden and Casper Darling of the Federal Bureau of Control. Alan is then thrown out and back into the projector room. He spots an echo. Casey reveals a police report coming in from a hotel. A murderer to play, which itself featured a murder cult. A further echo inspires Alan, by way of someone who seems to be the director of the play, Ed Booker, mentioning that the play seemed to have been cursed from the pre-show ritual. The play was in the style of immersive theatre, a play where the audience can participate, and it ran across the entire hotel. The play itself is alleged to have special power attached to it, that if you call for the devil, he will come. Alan changes the scene. Further into the hotel, Alan discovers another scene, the area which would contain the final scene, but it's closed off. Manipulating the dark place again, Alan finds a prop room was moved. Finding the room, Alan uses it to change the scene and he finds another echo. Turns out that the Ocean View Hotel was perfect for this particular play because it is said to be haunted, murder and death. It's said that an actual cult once performed an unspeakable ritual there in which they summoned something in the ballroom. The director thinks that they summoned the same something in their play. Now heading into the ballroom, Alan changes the scene again and finds another echo.
What was the scene in this room?
Well, this is what we call the writer's room. In the play, it's where the devil rewrites reality whilst God is asleep. The devil was our star role. I got a big-time celebrity to play him, and he was method acting the role to perfection. He never broke character, always wore the cult mask. His name was scratched out on the posters.
And who was this mystery celebrity? Let me guess. Alan Wake?
I wish I could tell you, but turns out there were masks upon masks. Whoever he really was, shit got weird when he was around. Some of the crew joked that we'd actually hired the devil to play himself.
Mr. Scratch is the devil. He was born to play the role.
I had to agree with Casey on that.
He's found his murder site. After changing the scene, it's a dark and grisly sight. Bodies everywhere, Scratch's handiwork displayed throughout the hotel, leading to an echo of Casey. Scratch had requested the room 666. Reaching this room, Alan realizes that Scratch had been there. Another echo. It seems that the leading lady of the play was killed, and this leading lady claimed that she knew the original writer of the play, that she was his muse, which coincidentally was also her role in the play. It turns out that Scratch had only joined the play to get to her, to murder her. Alan is chased by the dark presence again. It's being drawn to Alan as the story he writes becomes darker with every thread. Alan reaches the final scene, the climax. A body lies in the bathtub. Alan notices a record underneath it, but both the body and the record vanish. All of a sudden, Alan feels closer to home again. Even closer this time. Saga mentions that she has the clicker. The meeting ends and Alan goes to Parliament Tower again in the hope of helping Alice. His office is locked again. Alan finds a number of stations set up showing pre-recorded videos of Alice. Her project was filling the entire apartment. She was obsessed, but in trying to find Alan, she only ended up finding Scratch.
For months after Ellen died, I didn't leave the apartment. I was flattened by the confusion, the shock, the guilt, fear. I could barely get out of bed. Barry Wheeler started visiting. He even cooked me meals. I couldn't stand the guy when I first met him, but he's a better friend than I gave him credit for. And he still checks in. Even after he moved out west. There was something in the dark. Something I needed to see, to show. The more shadows I photographed and filmed, the more I felt like I was on the verge of a breakthrough. I submerged myself in it. I only went out at night. My search became obsessive, but I still had no idea what I was looking for. There's a world hidden behind ours. A dark tide ebbing and flowing against reality. Faces in the shadows. Fear of the dark is really just fear of what could be, that vast, paralyzing ocean. But photography can freeze reality in a snapshot, put a cage around the infinite and capture it. I need to prove those faces are really there.
Alan enters into the TVs once again and enters his office. This time there's no one there. On the desk he finds the finished copy of Return, a horror story about the dark presence escaping from the dark place and taking over Bright Falls.
I couldn't remember writing it. I had not written it. I would never write this. I knew who had. Scratch. A monster with my face. If this story came true, Scratch would get out, people would die. Destroying the manuscript, it wouldn't stop it from happening. I would have to fix it, edit it. I could not change the genre of the story. I'd have to work within the constraints set by Scratch. I needed someone in the story to fight the darkness. Saga Anderson. I kept seeing her in my visions. She was already in Bright Falls, already involved, but she was not in Return. Not yet. I'd write her in. Try to stop Scratch within the limits of the horror story. It was almost impossible. It was taking too long. I had not reached the end.
The loop begins again. Alan comes to in his chair in his safe haven, his writing room. Scratch had stopped Alan before he could finish making the edits to Return. Scratch was there at Parliament Tower undoing what Alan had just done. It's time for draft number 3. This time, Alan needs to go further and pay Tom Zane another visit. Alan needs a third murder site in order to get back to Parliament Tower again. He projects himself back to the start, to the TV studio again. Mr. Dorr is sitting there in the dark. He tells Alan that he doesn't even know who is under his own mask, that he keeps putting himself through convoluted loops. Dorr tells Alan that Alice is in danger because of Alan, as is someone important to Mr. Dorr, someone that Alan pulled into this nightmare. That Alan keeps opening doors and peeking inside, reaching through to get what he wants. Dorr gives Alan a stark warning that if they meet again, he needs to play his part or stay out of his way. Alan speaks to Attie again. He tells Alan that he's left some photos for him down in the basement. Picking them up, recognizing them as Alice's photos, Alan sees that one is a photo of the clicker and the other is a bullet of light. After seeing more TV showing himself freaking out, Alan leaves the TV studio and goes up to the street. He heads back to the Ocean View Hotel to speak with Thomas Zane.
I'm in control now. The second you try anything, I will shoot you in the head. Scratch wrote Return, not me. You're a fucking liar.
You'd given up. You stopped writing. You said it was too dangerous, that we didn't deserve to get out. And then he showed up. Scratch. He promised to write. To get me the hell out of here. He was magnificent. A visionary. I mean, it was art. Then, when he finished, he took Return and left me behind.
It's still here, and so is he.
I know I fucked up. But you can still catch him before he gets out. Before he gets to your wife. When you get to him, don't
ये भी राइटर होता है ना
hesitate.
Thomas Zane.
Kill the bastard for what he did to us. There's a murder site in my cinema where my film Nightless Night is playing.
Nightless Night.
So with that information, Alan heads to the cinema. It's playing Zane's film, Nightless Night, a companion piece to Return which was previously lost. Finding an echo in the lobby, Alan gets his first piece of inspiration. The cinema was a place of significance to the cult, so Alan changes the scene once again. In the back room, he finds another echo. This, one of Casey's speaking to a cultist. The cultist claimed that 2 New York police officers had been doing favors for the cult, eager to earn their place among them, and that they were to take part in an initiation ritual. The cultist threatens Casey and tells him that he will meet their leader soon enough. Changing the scene to fit this new narrative angle, Alan enters the theatre.
The urban legends circling Thomas Zane were a bottomless rabbit hole. I'd done some digging. To film freaks, he was a mythic auteur in the art house cinema. A rising star coming to America from Finland. But he only created one film, Tom the Poet, before he went missing, mirroring the vanishing of the main character in the movie, played by himself. The biggest mystery was...
Endgame.
Now getting back to Saga's side of things, after sending Scratch away, she speaks with Casey and Estevez. Estevez is pissed that Saga almost handed what the FBC believe could be an object of power over to a hostile entity. After a little squabble about keeping secrets from one another, Estevez hands over a key to her own set of secrets, FBC files on Alan Wake. The conversation with Casey reveals more of what he thinks happened to Logan.
You really don't remember Logan living in Virginia with me and David?
I remember you and David having problems. You needed a break. You and Logan moved to Watery and then Logan, oh, that awful thing happened. After you came back to work, I thought you'd be the perfect partner for this case, if you were willing to return to the area.
Okay. That's enough. The story is changing your memories. What you're remembering is fiction. Logan is alive. I'm not divorced. We never moved here. I remember the truth.
No. Wake or Scratch, whoever that was, said the story could be used to attack us. We all need to question what's real. With that said, how do we know the story isn't giving you false hope?
I can't convince them. I just need to change the story.
Scratch then tries to infiltrate Saga's mind place, but she kicks him out. Checking out the files Estevez gave her access to, they detail an interview with Alan Wake, which shows him exhibiting aggressive behavior, more early indication that he was in fact actually Scratch. And another file which details the Dark Presence's ability to disguise itself as others, i.e. Barbara Jagger in 2010. Another details that the lake is the gateway to the Dark Place, and the final document describes the clicker. Estevez, Saga, and Casey come up with a plan. The plan is to get Odin and Tor to play a song about getting Alan Wake out of the Dark Place on the Cauldron Lake shoreline. This, they hope, will draw Scratch out. The FBC will have a containment unit set up, and Saga is to lure Scratch into the unit, bright light to be shone into it, hopefully defeating Scratch and getting Wake out of the Dark Place in the process.
The clicker can amp up other works of art, not just Tom's writing. Anything created with passion. The dark power of the lake will make it creep into reality. But if the holder of the clicker believes in the art, they can make it all come true in the flick of a switch.
I can use the clicker without Wake. Only Wake's writing can change the horror story. But I can use the clicker to change something else. Like getting Wake out of the Dark Place.
The plan is a go. Saga makes her way to Cauldron Lake and calls her husband.
David.
David! It's me. Where have you...
Stop. For once, you need to listen. You left me. You took my daughter away from me. Then you let her... She's dead because of you. And I don't ever want to hear your voice again. Stop calling me.
David! Jesus Christ.
She did.
It's getting worse. It's spreading. I'm running out of time.
After seeing the FBC chopper carrying the equipment to the shoreline, Saga arrives and speaks with Tor and Odin, and everything is set up, including all the FBC equipment. The song starts, but unfortunately the song is drawing most of the Taken nearby to the area. Saga has to fight off Scratch's army of darkness, but eventually she manages to use the clicker.
What happened? Why didn't it work? I did everything right. Art to bring him back? Clicker to make it real? So where the fuck is he?
Going back to Alan's escape from the Dark Place, after he placed the photographs in the shoebox, he then goes to Parliament Tower. Reaching the apartment, it's empty. He attempts to enter the office, but is blocked. He says that Scratch is in there. The only thing in the apartment is a projection of Alice Wake's documentary. Alan projects himself into it.
It won't end. Like a nightmare I can't wake up from. I thought I could contain Ellen in my photos, but I can't. The monster just keeps coming back. Every night. Like waves hitting the shore. I'm so tired. so much rage inside of him, I can't stand it anymore. God, I tried so hard. I have made a decision. Most of you won't understand. I can't keep going like I have been. It's time for a perspective shift. To go from photographer to subject. From artist to art.
Oh, she died. She committed suicide.
Furious, Alan confronts Scratch.
Alice was dead. Scratch tortured her until she couldn't stand it anymore. Until she broke. And all that time, she thought it was me. Scratch was still here. He hadn't escaped the dark place yet. He was scratching my edits out of return. I had seen this before. This was not Scratch. This was me. Caught in a loop. I had stopped myself trying to fix the manuscript. I was the one haunting Alice. It was always me. I killed her.
Bring Wake back from the dark place with the song and the clicker. But he didn't end up here now. He landed on the shore after I faced Nightingale in the overlap. That night I found Wake here. He appeared because of this. The summoning. That was Wake. Scratch wasn't pretending to be Wake. They're the same person.
He's here! Scratch! Watch out, Anderson!
Estevez, Scratch is Wake with the dark presence inside him. He wants the clicker. Change of plan. I'll lure him to the cell. When we're inside, lock it and blast it with all you got.
Saga then fights Alan and Scratch. She manages to turn the lights and trap him within the containment unit, and they blast it with light. It blows the roof off of the unit.
Survived.
I'm sorry.
Wake? Is it you?
I'm so sorry.
Did it work? Casey?
Casey!
With Saga now in the dark place along with Tor and Odin, who went in after her, and with Casey now possessed by Scratch, it's now up to Alan, now free of the dark presence, to fix things. Speaking with Estevez, Alan says that using the clicker, Scratch will go to Bright Falls and bring about the ending he wrote for Return. Alan needs to get Scratch's manuscript, or rather the ending, and rewrite it. Alan fights his way out of Cauldron Lake and uses Saga's car to drive back to Bright Falls.
If Scratch had brought the dark place here, this would take me back inside.
2010, I dived in, a leap of faith for Alice, with no idea that the cost would be a nightmare worse than death. It had taken me 13 years to get out. Now Alice was dead, because of me. And I was gonna make that leap again, this time knowing the cost all too well. Another way to look at it, I had brought the dark place here with me. I never had gotten out. Maybe after this I finally could. It was a fool's hope. I had no choice. I had to do it. That didn't make me any less terrified. Fuck it.
Seems that Scratch's ending was a lot brighter than Alan had expected. Apparently, Return is breaking every literary record in existence. Alan eventually finds a copy of the book. The writer's room is featured in the photo of Alan's home on the back of the book. It seems that Departure, Initiation, and Return were part of a horror trilogy. Alan is being approached by the residents of Bright Falls who are attempting to kill him. They know he's wanting to change the ending. He now needs to get to the writer's room. The writer's room itself is at the Valhalla nursing home. The way into the front entrance is locked, so Alan has to go through the wellness centre. He hears Alice's voice. At some point on his way through, Alan is confronted by Scratch and is chased through the wellness centre. He escapes with the help of Rose, who after helping Saga, threw herself into the dark place to try and save Alan. She claims to have been following the messages Alan left her, but he says he didn't leave any messages. Nonetheless, Alan heads to the writer's room to change the ending to Return. She speaks to Atty by the door, who is still referring to him as Tom. Alan enters and sits down to write. He needed to take everything that had already been written and extend it into a conclusion that would save everyone. The ending Scratch had written in was for an eternal Deerfest, which would spread over time, reaching everyone in the world. He would then plunge the entire world into darkness. Alan plans an ending and feels a presence in the room, preparing for Scratch to burst through the door to try and stop him. Now, switching back to when Saga was thrown into the dark place, she ends up in her mind place, but she can't leave. She's trapped there and starts to panic. Now, this wouldn't be a massive problem, but for the fact that the dark presence is trying to invade it. It's bringing up and highlighting her insecurities, telling her that Logan is dead, and that she's a terrible mother, and that she's a terrible partner because she put Casey in danger. But she eventually finds a flashlight and burns away the dark energy, revealing her achievements and the things in life she holds dear to her, including her loved ones. Finally, Saga is able to leave and steps into the darkness outside. She steps into Alan's version of New York City and receives a phone call from a mysterious woman. She tells Saga that she needs to go to the statue at Parliament Tower Plaza in order to make her ending come true. She makes her way through Caldera Street Station and goes to the plaza. Inside, she finds the clicker, along with a bullet of light. Another phone call from the mysterious woman reveals that Alan is lost, that he doesn't have the ending, and that he needs Saga's help. Saga enters her mind place in order to talk to Alan, indicating that the presence he felt in the room was in fact her.
I don't have the ending. It has to be perfect, but I don't have time to figure it out. I don't know what to do. Fuck. I'm so sorry. This whole thing is a fucking mess.
I agree. But we can still figure this out. And what exactly does perfect mean?
The elements of the ending need to come from the story's pre-existing parts. To make matters worse, this is a horror story.
You don't need to tell me this is a horror story.
Right. The ending has to fit the genre if it's going to work. In a horror story, there are only victims and monsters.
There must be a way to bring a hero into the story.
If there is a hero, they will ultimately pay a heavy price.
I can't let the horror story take Logan and Casey. They were dragged into this. They need to survive. Non-negotiable.
Not just them. We need to try to save everyone. I have an idea how to help Casey. He's a real person who I twisted into a character. He isn't my creation, so he isn't a suitable host for the Dark Presence. I can write that into the ending to drive that fucking thing out of him.
So the ending has to be earned, set up by the story. You can't build a case without supporting evidence.
That's the only way to make it stick.
Well, if the ending has to fit the story. This is how I see it. Return is a story about a story that comes true. And I'm a character in the story.
Not just a character. The hero.
Okay, a hero. In any case, I've been through hell to be here. And this is my life. It feels earned to me that I rise above the story and be there to create the ending.
Yes. That's what we're doing. Here, now. We're figuring out the ending I need to write.
This isn't Scratch's ending. But this isn't your ending either. This is our ending. You aren't the only one deciding these things anymore.
You're right. I can't do this alone. Every time I write, things only get worse.
You beat this thing back in 2010, Alan. And here you are doing the same again. You're a hero too. We're in this together.
Then let's bring it home.
The ending will have to be dark, no matter what. The more people we save, the greater the cost. And the hero must pay the price.
One of the heroes. The scales always need to balance. Fuck it. Let's go with this.
Are you sure?
There's no time for anything better. Scratch could be here any second.
Then that's our ending. I have the clicker. I'll find a way to get it to you.
And I'll get the pages down. See you on the other side.
Going back through the station again, Saga approaches another monument and steps into the dark energy that engulfs it as she walks into Alan's writer's room.
Alan?
Saga, I finished it. The ending we talked about.
I have the clicker. And the bullet of light. Let's do this. I have to be the one to do it.
I feel like I've always been on this journey. Okay. It must end here. This darkness. What lies under the surface now shifts. A play of shadows catching my eye, thrusting my face into the water.
He's here.
It's shockingly cold. Past the mirror of the surface. And I will see.
KC?
The end. Scratch. Now.
A white, searing light of truth that for a flash pierces the shadows and reveals the hidden horror. And in that moment of silence, the whispered message finally heard.
Come on, you motherfucker. Come on.
What if there's nothing waiting to be revealed? The play of shadows fooled us all, subterfuge to get our price of admission. Darkness not as a monster, but as emptiness. We're none the wiser. No answers, no truths. The hero turns to look inside. Is destroyed by what he sees, and is redeemed. Saga said we're both heroes. I'll pay that price. So will she. We are here to kill the monster. I pray nothing comes after this. Nothing but sleep. This is how we win. Is it too easy? What if this is still the dark place? Another dream to wake up from, always coming back to the beginning. The memory of what came before burned away by this terrible realization. Maybe it's a mercy, forgetting. To know nothing when we loop around, back to...
Is it over? Anderson?
The game then ends. Alright, so we've got a hell of a lot to go through and unpack here, but I guess the best place to start would be to explain the ending. Alright, so at the end of the game we see that after Saga presses the clicker on the shore, Alan comes back momentarily and disappears. Her pressing the clicker is actually what brought Alan back here, after she defeated Nightingale,
I'll explain
not
to you
Alan's
about-
work on Initiation or her defeating Nightingale and destroying the overlap. Remember, the Dark Place doesn't really experience time, it's just a pocket dimension. Upon entering the writer's room in the Dark Place at the end of the game, Alan attempts to rewrite the ending to Return. To be clear, Return are the events of Saga and Casey's investigation in Bright Falls. Return was written, but Alan has effectively been undoing all of his own, and Scratch's, earlier work. It's pretty confusing, but let's press on. Alan struggled to find the ending. When Saga was in the Dark Place and managed to escape the Mind Place, she was contacted by the mysterious woman, and that woman in particular was none other than Alice Wake. We'll get into what exactly happened to Alice after the events of the first game shortly, but essentially Alice was in the Dark Place. She'd faked her death in order to deceive Alan, and by extension Scratch, so that he would stop haunting and tormenting her. And it worked. The images of her ending things was actually her jumping into Cauldron Lake to look for and to help Alan escape. At the end of the game, after Saga has shot Alan with a bullet of light, he comes to in his writer's room once again, ready for a new cycle, if you like, and he says the words, "It's not a loop, it's a spiral." Essentially what Alice is saying is that a loop is never ending, but a spiral has an obvious ending point. The bullet of light purged the darkness from Alan. Now he's just got to progress further through the spiral with Alice's help now that he knows there's an end and it's not a loop. And this is explained by Alice in a post-credits scene.
This part is just for you. I chose to come back to the Dark Place. That is why I put on this exhibition. I had to mislead you, so that I could get you to where you needed to be. The only way out of your loop is destruction or ascension, light or dark. And we've covered the destruction part many times over. And we're getting to the ascension bit by bit. Time means nothing here. You'll still need to go through the loop. But I will keep showing you the images you need to see, the light you need to see, until you're ready. Alan, I think we're getting close.
So we got an addition to the Dark Place in Alan Wake 2 in the form of the overlap. The first one we see is at the tree in Cauldron Lake. An overlap is described as existing at sites of violence and tragedy which are themselves laced in fiction, urban legends. Urban legends connected to a specific place, and these urban legends would be retold, sparking fear in people which soften the walls of reality. These overlaps also need a counterpoint, which can be a work of art crafted in the depths of the Dark Place, and that work of art has to connect to the story on the other side. For example, when it came to Cauldron Lake, at the witch's ladle where it said the witch ripped out the sheriff's heart, in the real world, a lawman, Nightingale, had his heart cut out of his chest. When it came to Watery, the urban legend was that two brothers murdered their neighbours and hid their bodies down a well, Huatari Well. The two deputies, Mulligan and Thornton, killed an innocent woman called Monica Thompson by accident, thinking that she was a taken, and they hid her body down the well.
What? Killing of Monica Thompson was their mistake. Thornton blamed Mulligan's itchy trigger finger. Mulligan blamed Thornton's shitty... They only agreed it wasn't their fault. No one will find her corpse. We'll hide it. They fed the body in off crumbling well like the murderers. What the fuck, bhai? They lied to everyone. The world would never get out by the secret like that doesn't die. It grew inside them like cancer, darkness taking over, finish shape.
In terms of Bright Falls, there was an urban legend near the Valhalla nursing home. A young girl, aged 15, named Nora, drowned inside a bunker whilst playing with her friend. The overlap was opened at the nursing home because Cynthia Weaver drowned in a bathtub at the nursing home as a result of the dark presence deceiving her.
Cynthia, acha, ye bhi mari thi.
We'll get into what exactly happened to Cynthia a bit later on. This explains the nature of the overlaps and why they were able to appear. The real-life incidents all mirrored the dark urban legends attached to those locations, and these overlaps subsequently amplified the Dark Place's influence over the area, and this led to the overlap causing reality to twist and loop. The blending of the dark place and the real world through the overlap is why Nightingale was able to just disappear into it. In order to get it into the overlap, a scene or ritual needs to be completed which mirrors or bears resemblance to the legend. The heart being placed into the witch's sign, opening the overlap in the tree, the parade float showing the brothers' crimes, opening the overlap in the well, and the old god's record opening the overlap at the nursing home in the pond. In terms of why the overlap caused flooding, it's likely the lake stretching its influence over the nearby area. It's important to remember as well that the dark place doesn't follow the standard rules of time. Time effectively does not exist in the dark place, and this is why Saga and Alan's meetings were so jumbled up. For example, Saga meeting Alan in the first overlap is actually after she defeated Nightingale. Saga meeting Alan in the second overlap is after she defeated Cynthia Weaver, and Saga meeting Alan in the third overlap is after she defeated Mulligan and Thornton. One thing I noticed that has changed in terms of Mr. Scratch is that Scratch's appearance is now different. He was almost like a second Alan, but in Alan Wake 2, he's more like a dark cloud that possesses Alan. Now we know that Scratch is just Alan with the dark presence inside of him, it makes a lot more sense, and here's why. The way we see Scratch now is much more akin to the Mr. Scratch we saw in Alan Wake's American Nightmare. If you're not aware, what happened in American Nightmare was one of Alan's many attempts to leave the dark place to return,
everyone.
this time through a TV episode of Night Springs. Only in trying to escape, Mr. Scratch was created. American Nightmare is basically Alan writing a story so that he could defeat Scratch. Scratch came about through public perception of Alan, that he was mean and violent, that he was insane. Scratch went out into the real world and brought these perceptions to life. Alan would attempt to use the power of the dark place to utilize shifts in reality until a final confrontation with Scratch, where he did manage to defeat him, and after defeating him the dark presence returned to its previous state, a dark cloud. American Nightmare's place in the canon of Alan Wake and the Remedyverse as a whole has been a hotly contested topic, but Sam Lake did appear to confirm that it is in fact canon. Now let's look at how the dark presence itself works and operates.
Dark presence.
The darkness inside people seems to come from words written onto people's hearts. We see this on Nightingale's heart, where the words, "The wave crashed on the far side of the mirror," was written. In terms of Alan creating people from nothing, his third draft of Initiation states that he'd never created anyone. The dark power of the dark place changed and just messed up lives instead of creating them. For example, Alex Casey. Casey was a real detective in New York. The use of his name by Alan in his books was, in my opinion, purely coincidental. Now, since Alex Casey was a real detective, the power, using Alan's writing as a conduit, changed what Casey thought was real. Alan wrote about the cult murders in New York City as part of his drafts of Initiation, and this essentially rewrote Casey's past, to the point that Casey recalls investigating them, and his notes in his room state similarities between the Cauldron Lake Cult of the Tree murders and the Cult of the Word murders. As well as this, Casey was convinced that Saga's daughter was dead, and that Saga was struggling to come to terms with it. The story seems to be getting its hooks further into Casey, judging by a conversation in the morgue after the sheriff's station was attacked.
Logan, she's, the story claims she died here. But we can stop it.
Wait, Saga. What do you, Logan is gone. She has been. For a long time.
Casey's affected by the horror story, too.
Alan had used Alex Casey in his writing for years, and the real Casey was drawn to Bright Falls because of it. This was all the result of Alan's writing in the Initiation part of the game, changing reality. We see that this change went as far as the FBC even having written that into their case notes in regard to their investigations into Alan Wake, that they were aware of cult murders in New York City, and that Alan was potentially the cult's prophet. As some of you may know from the last game, the Dark Presence uses people's memories and fears in order to leave them open to corruption by the Dark Presence. This is perhaps best seen through what happened to Cynthia Weaver.
What happened?
So we know her as the Lamp Lady or the Lady of the Light. During the events of 2010, she was always holding her lamp close to her chest. She had an angel lamp which belonged to Thomas Zane. See, Cynthia was infatuated with Zane, but she loved him. She hated Barbara, When visiting the power plant in the well-lit room, we see that Cynthia was obsessed with making sure the lights were always on, even pestering the sheriff's department for them to make sure their lights were working. She was terrified, not really of the dark, but of the dark presence itself. As mentioned, the dark presence uses people's memories and fears to corrupt them. Cynthia's fear was the lights going out. The angel lamp didn't even work as the light switch had been removed, but the lamp kept her fears at bay. In the game, we see what happened to Cynthia in her diary. She mentions that the caretaker for the nursing home, Mr. Bloom, was a bit lax on checking the lights, and Cynthia would go to the basement to do it herself. She comments on how, since she's getting older, it's getting harder and harder for her to reach them. And then eventually she couldn't do it anymore. Her angel lamp that she held dear to her just disappeared. Well, not really. You see, Rose Marigold had been receiving messages, not just through dreams, but through secret messages and newspaper adverts. She was convinced that these messages were being sent to her by Alan. The messages had told Rose to prepare for the arrival of the hero who would save them all, which was Saga. Rose then procured every single Alex Casey lunchbox she could get her hands on, and left messages for the hero to find, to inspire them, and something inside to help them on.
Cynthia Weaver is dead.
On their journey. She obtained the help of a resident at the nursing home, Mandy May. Alan said that Saga enjoyed knitting, so Rose had Mandy May knit pattern knitwear in order to hint that a lunchbox was nearby. Alan would later state when he saw her in the dark place that he hadn't left Rose any messages. He just didn't remember. It was Scratch, preparing the hero for return. But back to the lamp, Rose had received a message from Alan that he needed the angel lamp, so whilst Cynthia was at breakfast, Rose took it, placed it inside a shoebox and dropped it into the pond. Cynthia was crestfallen as she had nothing else left of Tom's. She needed him. The fear in her started to grow. She started to notice shadows moving in her room. Then, as she'd been preoccupied, she'd forgotten to replace the light bulb in her bathroom. And one day it blew. She slipped getting out of the bath and fell into the water, and a dark shape pushed her down, and she became corrupted by the dark presence. As a result, every lamp in her room had been smashed. Cynthia Weaver is who Alan sees in the bathtub in the hotel during his time in the dark place. It's the body of Cynthia Weaver. She was killed and became taken. Scratch then used Cynthia to try and seduce Tor and to drag him into the dark place so that Saga could not get to him. The last we saw of Nightingale was when he was taunting Alan at the Bright Falls Sheriff Department. He was reading an all too familiar page from Departure and was swept away by Jagger and the Dark Presence. After the Dark Presence was banished from Bright Falls in 2010, every taken in the area was sucked into Cauldron Lake and into the Dark Place, and this of course included Nightingale. Inside the Dark Place, Nightingale was once again subjected to Alan's writing. Nightingale was effectively killed off by Alan. The writer he hated had him killed off again, murdered by the cult. Scratch then used Nightingale by ejecting him from the Dark Place and from Cauldron Lake, and Nightingale was reborn, out of hate, to search for the clicker. In some previous videos I did an investigation where I looked at some evidence sent to me by Remedy which pertained to the Cauldron Lake murders that Saga Anderson and Alex Casey were there to investigate. Through that investigation we tried to piece together why these people were targeted and what the victims all had in common. The three victims in question were Wendy Davis, Ted Lane and Percy Wolfe. First to be found was Bright Falls resident and dentist Ted Lane, who went missing in 2010. Ted Lane's body showed signs of bloating, and he was also stabbed in a frenzy. He was then buried in Watery Woods in 2012, being found by a local dog walker. 6 years later, in 2018, Bright Falls kindergarten teacher Wendy Davis's body was found, also bloated. Difference this time was that her heart was removed. Wendy, who
in prison, especially unusual and natural cremation.
who originally went missing in 2010, was found in Cauldron Lake, having been submerged for 8 years. Then in 2023, a Bright Falls tackle shop owner, Percy Wolfe, also missing since 2010, had also been murdered, and his body showed up in a dumpster in a Bright Falls construction site with his heart missing. His body also showed signs of being submerged underwater. And someone wanted this body to be found. A deer mask was found near the site of one of the murders, so this implicated a local legend, a cult calling themselves the Cult of the Tree. Then, around the time the FBI agents arrived in Bright Falls, a fourth victim turned up. And here's what really happened. In this section, I'll explain things as a timeline, incorporating the victims and how it led to the forming of the cult. We'll start in 2010. As mentioned earlier, all those with darkness inside them were pulled into the lake after the dark presence was banished. As a side note, Rose, however, was not taken into the dark place as she was protected by the lamp. The Federal Bureau of Control had fenced off Cauldron Lake after the Bright Falls Altered World event, and disappearances had calmed down. The area of the Cauldron Lake campgrounds was now completely abandoned, but some people refused to be kept out. In the words of the Koskela twins,
"Fuck the government. We have both cutters. Oh, you think of everything."
One evening, the Koskela twins, Ilmo and Jaakko Koskela, were smoking a joint on the shoreline of Cauldron Lake, and a man emerged from the lake. It was one of the murder victims, Ted Lane. That's right, Ted Lane was turning into a taken. Freaking out, the brothers attacked Ted Lane with a traditional Finnish puukko knife, stabbing him in a frenzy. And that was it. Convinced that the government was trying to hide whatever was happening and desperate not to have another incident like 2010 happen again, Jaakko Koskela was seeing double and noticed the FBC seal on the FBC files they had stolen. More specifically, he saw the upside-down pyramid which represented the paranatural entity known as the Board. Because Jaakko was seeing double, he saw two pyramids stacked on top of one another, and they saw it as a sign that they needed to keep the woods safe by making the woods scary again. And just like that, the Cult of the Tree was born. They were actually the good guys. Kind of. They would operate out of the clubhouse of the Koskela's Kalevala Knights motorcycle club and would wear deer masks. Ilmo would rig the FBC's Cauldron Lake monitoring station to alert the cult when something was about to go down at the lake, and they'd sit in wait. One day they were alerted to more activity in Cauldron Lake, so they went to the shoreline, but found a device had been washed up, the clicker. The Koskelas had read about this clicker in the FBC files, about how Alan Wake had used it to defeat Barbara Jagger.
एक सेकेंड. बेसिकली कल्ट जो थे बेसिकली वो प्रोटेक्ट कर रहे थे अपने टाउन को. बेफालतू में उनको पेल दिया. वो गंदा पूरा. Yep.
They also read about how Hartman and Jagger went into the lake and came out bad. They then assumed that if Alan Wake came out of the lake, then he too would come out bad as well. The cult's methodology changed as a result of what they'd learned. Mimicking what Alan Wake did, they would cut out the heart of the Taken, push the clicker into the hole, flick the switch, destroying the dark presence inside of them, and this would become their ritual. They would then hide the clicker underneath the clubhouse in a secret meeting room on an altar. They would view the Taken as nothing more than animals, not human. All was quiet for a few years until 2018, when another person emerged from Cauldron Lake. It was another of the Cauldron Lake murder victims, Wendy Davis. The cult took action and took her down, removing her heart and using the clicker. They then disposed of her body, and she was found on the bed of the lake. Over the years, the cult had become an urban legend of its own, considered by some in the area to be feral maniacs. But of course, they were formed in order to keep the communities of Bright Falls and Watery safe from the Taken and the darkness inside of them.
Look, what kind of a cult calls themselves a cult? Exactly. We protect Watery and Bright Falls. We're the good guys. A secret neighborhood watch. Well, that was the idea anyways. Look, we've always known about the horror inside the lake. When any Taken come out, we kill them.
You don't turn people into Taken. You kill the ones who already have.
Unfortunately, some within the ranks of the cult were not following orders, and some cultists kept sabotaging FBC equipment, even though the Koskelas warned the cult not to do it, as it would bring unnecessary attention to them. Nonetheless, the cult would grow, and many people from the two towns joined the cult, and the cult would leave each other stashes around the woods and towns in case they needed supplies in order to fight off the Taken. People would receive acceptance letters welcoming them to the Cult of the Tree, one of which was Vladimir Bloom. His job was to recruit Tor and Odin Anderson. Mistakes started to be made in the cult though, and the cultists were starting to get sloppy. Then in 2023, a third person emerged from Cauldron Lake, a tackle shop owner named Percy Wolf. He was killed by the cultists, his heart removed, and the ritual was successful, but his body was left in a dumpster in a construction site, and obviously for someone to find. The woods were not safe, so it's possible the cult left the body there on purpose to warn people against going in the woods. Wolf's body turning up ignited the Ted Lane and Wendy Davis cases, which were cold cases, and a two-person investigation team consisting of FBI agents Saga Anderson and Alex Casey were sent to Bright Falls to investigate. Then, just after the agent got there, another taken emerges from Cauldron Lake, former FBI agent Robert Nightingale. The cult do their usual thing by sitting in wait for Nightingale to stumble upon their ritual site. The Bookers had broken into the fenced-off area to do research and stumbled upon the ritual site. They interrupted the ritual, and as a result, unlike other victims, Nightingale became a monster. The Dark Presence, Scratch had sent him, along with the other 3 victims, to find and obtain the clicker. That's why Nightingale says, "Show me the clicker," when he reanimates in the morgue. These people all emerged from the lake around the time when Deer Fest was due to take place. As remember, Scratch's return ending had an eternal Deer Fest, where he spread it across the world and plunged the world into darkness. Anyway, around this point, Ilmu Koskela was being tormented by the Dark Presence, and the alerts coming from the FBC monitoring equipment were getting more and more frequent. The Dark Presence was growing stronger, its influence was spreading, and was trying to corrupt him with nightmares of him killing his friend and his brother. The Dark Presence wanted to corrupt the cult leaders Ilmo and Yako, but found that they were resistant. The Dark Presence needed another pair of men prone to corruption, and this leads us onto Mulligan and Thornton. They wanted to join the cult and to prove themselves, and one day they saw something in the woods at night. They opened fire, but they'd killed a human, an innocent woman named Monica Thompson, and panicked, they hid her body down the Huatari well. This act left the deputies open to corruption by the Dark Presence, and they were corrupted, leading to Saga's showdown with them in the overlap in Watery. Then, as seen on this cultist stash, the word was out with the cultists that the feds had captured Alan Wake, and that is what led to the cult attacking the lodge.
Act of fiction.
During the game's opening events, we're thrown a curveball when Rose Marigold recognizes Saga. She spooks her slightly by saying that she thinks Saga is very brave going back there after what happened to her daughter Logan, that Logan drowned. This was in the back of Saga's mind and bothered her, considering she'd spoken to Logan on the phone, as well as her husband David only hours before. During the game, Saga sets up a case board called Fact or Fiction, which is her trying to work out what is real and what is not. So let's look at Saga's background, starting with what I think is fact first. So Saga is in fact the granddaughter of Tor and the great niece of Odin. In the late 80s, Saga's mother Freya lived in Bright Falls at the time, on the Anderson farm with her father. Now, at some point, Freya met a man and they had a child together, and Saga was born. Tor didn't get along with Saga's father, like, at all.
Your dad was a complicated bastard. Always thinking too many steps ahead. That's not how we work. There was trouble, and then he was gone. I didn't handle it well. Freya didn't want anything to do with me after that. I can't blame her.
I never knew my dad or my mom's family. So many broken relationships in my past.
If you're not aware, Tor carries around a hammer and actually does seem to be able to call upon lightning. In line with his name Tor, Tor is the Nordic god of thunder. Logan even drew a picture of Tor playing with thunder. Anyway, things all came to a head when Tor drove Saga's father away. Freya was furious and cut ties with Tor, taking Saga away. Saga was brought up not knowing who her father was. Now, there's a strong theory as to who Saga's father is. Wallendor. Freya told Saga that her father died shortly after she was born, but speaking with Sheriff Tim Breaker in the Dark Place, his research tells us that Mr. Dorr was electrocuted. We'll look further into Mr. Dorr in the next chapter, don't worry. It's certainly possible that Tor made Wallendor disappear. Saga would then grow up with a knack for investigating things due to her hereditary abilities. From an early age, she was able to go into her mind place, but her mother, well aware of the power since she possessed it too, told Saga that it was all make-believe. Ultimately, the other reason Freya left and moved away from her father was because she viewed Tor and Odin as dangerous due to their powers. I believe all of this is fact and not fiction. Saga doesn't remember Watery as she didn't grow up there. It would become inevitable that Saga would end up doing a job which utilised her talents, so she joined the FBI. She later got married and then had a child, Logan. Logan, due to her mother having a gift, likely possessed the same abilities. And it's possible, seeing as Saga possessed similar abilities to Mr. Door in the Dark Place, that Logan shares the power that her grandfather Mr. Door has as well. Another small hint that she possesses the ability to move about is through her drawings in the trailer. She seems to have drawn an image of the former, one of the former board members from Control. She even drew the clicker too. Due to her seer abilities, Saga wasn't affected by the writing in return. Neither was Tor, or Odin for that matter. Now, Saga's husband didn't have those abilities. Therefore, he was affected by the story, which is why he doesn't want to speak to Saga when she calls him, blaming her for their daughter's death. I think that Logan potentially managed to will herself to be somewhere else, the same as Mr. Door was able to do so. Maybe, but that's just a theory. When Saga is in the Dark Place, she comes across a familiar face, Sheriff Tim Breaker. He says that he was brought there by Wallen Door. He handed her a manuscript which describes Mr. Door finding his way through the Dark Place. The manuscript in question was the exact page that Sheriff Breaker tried to show Saga before he got brought to the Dark Place. It says that Mr. Door stopped at the door to the construction yard and stepped through it, simply willing it to take him where he wanted to go, and it did. Saga attempted it and of course managed to do the same thing. Tim Breaker couldn't do it, and neither could Alan. Alan has to follow a strict set of rules when travelling through the Dark Place. Saga also seems to have no problem navigating the Dark Place. She doesn't seem to have to follow the same directives and rules that Alan did. Same with Mr. Door, who seems to be able to travel around as he pleases. Family traits, I guess. A family of doors.
The Dark Place has many faces, and many names. It is a mirror, reflecting all possible realities. The family of doors have the power to shift between these realities, here and elsewhere.
If I can find a way to navigate through this nightmare, maybe I can find a way to get back home.
This is also another reason why Saga was able to communicate with Alan whilst he was in the Dark Place. Because of her connection to Mr. Door, she was able to use the Dark Place as she pleased. Anyway, I believe her being assigned to the case is where fact and fiction come to blur together, as getting Saga Anderson to Bright Falls to be the hero in the story was where her part in return would come to be. Saga's reality, as well as other people's, are being rewritten and altered temporarily. The clicker is needed in order to confirm those changes and set it as the new reality. Odin puts it best.
Good work getting the light switch. The light switch is like an amp. You can play rock and roll without it, but you won't blow anyone away. Art, like Tom's writing, can change the world, but the light switch will crank that change to 11.
The clicker has the power to change the story. To save Logan.
Right, now let's look at what is fiction, twisted and warped by Scratch's horror story. When they get to Bright Falls, the horror story starts to take hold. It's already starting when Rose tells Saga Logan drowned. Then when Saga is on the way back to Cauldron Lake to find Nightingale, she speaks to David and he reveals that Logan slipped in the bath and almost drowned, but she was fine. This, I guess, was a sign of things to come. Realities beginning to merge together, if you like. Rose had obviously never met Saga, neither had Ilmo and Jocko. The story and how it bends reality manifested that Saga had a trailer there in Watery, and after the death of Logan, the FBI gave her time off to grieve and recover. She would quickly leave to go back to work, leading to her and Casey going back to Bright Falls on the investigation. As we've heard, Casey was affected by Return's rewriting of what was real too, and he believed Logan was in fact dead. Ilmo claimed it was great to see her again when she arrived back in Watery, and going to the trailer she found that Ilmo had given her a book of puns, indicating that they were close at one point. I guess the Anderson brothers, Saga's family, were there waiting for her in order to warn her not to believe the story. So let's talk about Wallen Door, the man who I, and I'd imagine a lot of other people, believe to be the father of Saga Anderson. The first we see of Wallen Door is a flash of his image when Sheriff Timothy Breaker disappears in the morgue. When Alan visits Tim in the Dark Place, he pops up in multiple places and he's working on finding out more about the mysterious Mr. Door and where he came from. According to Tim's research, Mr. Door went missing in the 1980s. 1988 to be exact. This again lines up with the timeline of when Saga's father went missing. And Tim also says this at one point.
A local man named Wallen Door went missing near Cauldron Lake. Eyewitnesses claim he was struck by a bolt of lightning and just vanished. I never found any official records of a Wallen Door living in town or anywhere.
Tim says that throughout his life he's always had vivid dreams of being someone else, different life, a different name in a different world. I think Mr. Door chose Tim Breaker because Tim has a similar sort of gift. He'd also had dreams of Mr. Door too. I think the different person Tim Breaker may be referring to is Jack Joyce from Quantum Break. For obvious reasons, Remedy can't connect Alan Wake 2 to Quantum Break because the IP is owned by Microsoft, but I think I know what they may be getting at here. Again, this is pure speculation. Mr. Door may even be Mr. Hatch from Quantum Break, but I guess we'll have to wait a bit to find out more about the Door, Hatch and Breaker Joyce connection. Maybe Hatch is who Tim had been seeing in his dreams. The manuscript that Tim gave to Saga also describes Tim Breaker as Mr. Door's unwilling disciple, being the one to pass on this manuscript at the right time. And this obviously means passing it on to Saga. Tim drew a photo of Mr. Door when he was younger, and Sarah Breaker, Tim's cousin, sheriff at the time, said she'd recognised the picture from an old case file, so Tim moved out to Bright Falls to find out more. Tim says Mr. Door is far more than he seems, and that he's connected to everything that's happening. If we have a look at Tim's investigation board, we can see that he mentions a red-headed woman. And this is obviously Jessie Faden, director of the FBC. Tim writes that she seems to be connected to Door, but that her identity changes, and that she's connected to polyhedrons. We know this to be the paranatural entity Hedron. Check out my video on Control if you want to know more. But we know that the oldest house is located in New York City, but that it's only visible if you're directly looking for it. It exists in some sort of other dimension. If you remember, in Control there's a place Jessie can go called the Ocean View Motel, and this has a door with a spiral on it, same as Alan's writer's room, thought to be the door to the dark place. When Saga tries to use the spiral door in the real-world version of the Valhalla nursing home, Artie warns her not to go in there as she probably isn't going to like what she finds. But back to Mr. Door. During a Night Springs commercial, Mr. Door says this.
Night Springs, a special place, a shifting space, existing in a countless number of parallel realities. Sometimes a quaint small town, sometimes a hulking metropolis. Different every time we set upon the road that leads us there. And yet, like a half-remembered echo of a fading dream, always familiar to us. These are the stories that take place there. Awe-inspiring, macabre, terrifying, heartbreaking, nail-biting, absurd, and thrilling. Sometimes all of these things at once. A haunting new season of mind-bending episodes written by Alan Wake. I am your host, Orland Orr, and I will see you soon in Night Springs.
In Control, we learned that Night Springs had been acquired by the Federal Bureau of Control, and that they were going to use it to monitor public perception in terms of paranatural phenomena. Tim Breaker thinks that Night Springs itself is connected to Mr. Door. Tim also hums the Night Springs theme tune to himself. I think that the FBC, or rather Jessie and Casper Darling, aren't looking for Alan necessarily, but they are investigating Mr. Door instead. It needs to be said as well that Dr. Darling simply went missing in Control during the lockdown at the oldest house, and he locked himself in a room with Hedron. It's possible that something similar happened to Dr. Darling, but at this point, who knows? Now there is an upcoming DLC about Night Springs, so I guess we'll have to wait for that in order to find out anything concrete. Hopefully it will feature Jessie Faden, which will make for a really cool crossover in the Remedyverse. Another cool connection to Control is that Dylan Faden mentions Mr. Door.
I was in a dark place, and there was a dark man there. His name was Mr. Door, and he told me that there are many worlds, side by side, on top of each other, some inside of others. In one world, there was a writer who wrote a story about a cop. In another world, the cop was real. Door said he himself was in all of them at the same time, endlessly shifting between them. I asked him how I could reach these worlds. I wanted to bring the hiss there, but he didn't want to help me. He didn't like the idea. What did he know?
So Mr. Door is clearly some kind of guardian of the multiverse. He's very interested in learning more about different worlds, judging by this book in his dressing room written by Casper Darling. He travels between these worlds, and it's possible that Saga can too. When it came to Alan, Mr. Dorr isn't happy with him at all. Dorr clearly didn't like Wake for dragging Saga and her family, his family, into the horror story. Alan effectively did try to kill off his granddaughter. Dorr even tries to hint to Alan that he has an evil version of himself writing his books. He has pretty strong words for Alan when it came down to his own denial as to who Scratch really was, just Alan with the dark presence inside of him. But that's pretty much it for Mr. Dorr. We've just got to wait now until the game reveals more about him. But let's move on now and have a look at what the FBC have been up to.
FBC involvement.
We should start this section by looking at Alice Wake. She states at the end of the game that after the haunting she went to see an organisation. That organisation, if you've played Control, was the FBC. She showed them a photo that she took of Mr. Scratch. They then interviewed her. Alice then states what happened afterwards.
After the haunting started, I got in touch with an organization that was still looking into what happened in Bright Falls. I went to their offices and something happened there. After I got home, I could suddenly remember everything. I remembered being trapped inside that lake. A dark ocean with echoes of myself, my fears, my photos. Inside a dark tide of madness, the same events and images looping again and again. And then I saw a light. Your light. You dove in just as I swam out. You never drowned. And you're still there reaching out. That is what the haunting is. I can see you because I've been there too.
Then, as we already discussed, Alice then faked her own death to trick Alan and Scratch and jumped into Cauldron Lake. In terms of Alice, as far as we know, that's pretty much it. So now let's go over what the FBC were doing there in Bright Falls. During the events of Alan Wake 1 in 2010, we see that Barry Wheeler was calling people up and mentioning the term Night Springs, a code word for an altered world event taking place in the town. One of the people he called was former FBC agent Frank Breaker, who was active in the Bureau during the 70s. He was Sarah Breaker's father and Tim Breaker's uncle. I say was, as Tim reports that Frank has since passed away. Anyway, Frank reported back to the FBC, and then after the events of the Bright Falls altered world event, the FBC arrived in order to quarantine the area, fencing off Cauldron Lake. It was at this point that Dr. Hartman, Zane's assistant, after being imprisoned and then released by the Bureau, dove into Cauldron Lake after being arrested.
Dr. Emil Hartman was desperate. The Federal Bureau of Control had stolen his life's work. This was his last chance, his final experiment. What he'd been too scared to do before. Hartman dove into the lake, was taken, devoured by hungry darkness, became the thing that had been Hartman.
In reality, Dr. Hartman's clinic was just a testing ground in order for him to use artists to try and manipulate reality using the power of the lake. Hartman, now taken, later emerged from Cauldron Lake and was imprisoned by the FBC at the oldest house in their Bright Falls Altered World event area in the investigations sector. But as shown earlier, Dark Presence corrupted Hartman got corrupted by the Hiss 2, they merged and he became known as the Third Thing. He broke out of containment and attacked FBC staff, and the sector was abandoned until Jesse Faden eliminated what remained of Hartman. Around 2013, Alex Casey, who was looking into the New York City murders, had started to get strange letters in the mail, fragments which described the murders in detail, and the words written on the pages mirrored his own memories. The fragments being sent to Casey were excerpts from Alan Wake's Alex Casey books. It led him to the Federal Bureau of Control, but they stonewalled him. As some of you will remember, Alan is a para-utilitarian and was earmarked as a potential prime candidate for director of the Bureau until he went missing. This request from Casey ended up sparking an investigations team to be sent to Cauldron Lake, Bright Falls and Watery in order to carry out experiments, using fiction to hopefully draw from the power of Cauldron Lake and open a doorway into the dark place. They were testing to see if reality could be influenced through works of art. Their chosen art would be children's chalk drawings and nursery rhymes and riddles. They even tried to create the perfect environment for each test case, and they used props. Saga would come across these test sites in random areas, along with video cameras which would film the results, and Saga would find the dolls needed in order to complete these rhymes. Something very interesting happened at the final test site though, which was near to the lake.
What the? Who is this? How do you know I'm here?
I've been wondering your incessant hampering of my project. You have made some advantageous progress, however.
What project?
What project? So you've just been playing around with my test arrangements with absolutely no understanding of their function. Stupid.
Indeed.
But your interference with my research has come to its conclusion. And I'm interested to see the results. The trick, I believe, is in the manifestation of the nursery rhyme. Art becoming reality that the doorway may reveal the, or perhaps even someone entering it.
Get to the point.
Medicine and food, I see. The point is that by your unwanted actions, you may have opened the way. And now I get to observe what exactly occurs when a subject crosses this vessel. No, wait, that's not right.
What? Hello? Hey, are you there? Sounds like this person got more than they bargained for. Ugh, this stuff again. There's something else in there too.
The FBC agent had hoped that Saga would be sucked into the dark place, but it backfired and the agent got sucked in instead. During these investigations, the FBC would also start investigating and monitoring the cult. A file states that the FBC classified the clicker as a possible object of power, and they want to examine it, which is probably why they are monitoring the cult of the tree. One particular report talks about the lake house, and reports it being in a damaged state with everyone there dead. This is why Saga, after pressing the buzzer to the lake house by Cauldron Lake, receives no response. As a side note, one particular cultist presumed the FBC to be involved in people's disappearances. They were trying to research the lake, and they theorized that the FBC had a piece of secret machinery at the bottom of the lake, and that the FBC has a button inside the lake house. This site, the lake house, is to be covered in a future DLC, so again, we'll find out more soon. One manuscript for Return has it written into the story that after Agent Estevez had arrived in Bright Falls and Wake was taken into custody, the oldest house had gone dark, indicating some potential crisis, which may explain why Jesse and Dr. Darling appeared on the TV in the hotel in the dark place. One particular file shows that the FBC were monitoring operatives in the area. One is the Cult of the Tree, and the other is Alan Wake, and the third is redacted. This is likely Ati. Most of you will know that Ati is the janitor of the oldest house. He does a lot of work to ensure the safety of, well, everyone. And he's not exactly human. The game didn't really tell us too much more about him other than the fact that he was quite close with the old gods of Asgard, that he can travel between the dark place, the real world, and the oldest house, and we learned where he likes to take his holidays, Watery, or Little Finland as it's also known. Oh, and he likes to cause chaos at the nursing home too. Seems Artie liked to steal fuses. So, who is the real antagonist in this story? Is it the Dark Presence? Alan? Scratch? Well, I'm starting to think that the antagonist may even be Thomas Zane. I'd like to point out that this next chapter is pretty much pure speculation, but hey, it's a Remedy game and all we do is really speculate anyway. Let's start by looking at the clicker. The clicker can only be used with Wake's writing. Considering the clicker came from Thomas Zane's lamp and was an integral part of Alan's childhood, that it ended up in the well-lit room makes me lean towards the fact that Alan, although he is a very real person, had his reality rewritten by Thomas Zane, who used Alan and the clicker as sort of a fail-safe in order to facilitate his own escape from the dark place. The fact that the writing in the Remedy verse is so layered and deep leads me to think that there could be another 50 or so angles with which to look at it. But the newspaper article in the basement of the nursing home prompts more questions. Thomas Zane established an artists' commune in Bright Falls, and this is likely where his assistant, Emil Hartman, started working for him. This was whilst he was filming Tom the Poet, and he wanted to build a hotel which he would call the Ocean View Hotel along with a TV studio. These things all appeared within the dark place, so it's certainly possible that what we would have thought was Alan's mental projection of New York was actually Thomas Zane's projection. In the game, Ati, along with Tor and Odin, kept calling and referring to Alan as Tom. Well, I don't think it's any coincidence that Alan and Thomas Zane look exactly alike. Then there's the link to what Jesse Faden said on the therapy tape about Thomas Zane.
You mentioned a poem last time we talked. By Thomas Zane? Yes. Beyond the shadow we settle for, there's a miracle illuminated.
Thomas Zane.
I looked to throw him up, only I couldn't find any poet by that name. I did find a European filmmaker who moved here in the 60s, named Thomas Zane. What? No matter. It suits you very well. The poem. How you see things. Maybe you wrote it yourself? I didn't. No matter.
Only a select group of people seem to remember Tom as a poet and not a filmmaker. Jesse and Cynthia Weaver, to name a couple. Cynthia can't figure out why everyone is calling Tom a filmmaker. It's possible that Thomas Zane rewrote himself into being a filmmaker instead of a poet. Thomas Zane may also be a villain, shown by how he tried to betray Alan, telling him that return is the way out of the dark place, fully knowing that it was written by Scratch. He shows his true, possibly evil side when he's tied up, when he uses his power to switch places with Alan. Who else could manage to do that unless they had some sort of narrative power? After Alan shoots Zane, this happens.
Oh, mercy. Thousands have gone missing, beyond the labyrinth of me. When you're lost in your own company. And cut! Oh. Now that is drama.
It's possible that everything Alan is doing now is actually being written by Zane as a way for him to get out. In a nutshell, Thomas Zane altered Alan's existence and wrote him into the story to get him out. Alan is written in Saga and Casey to get himself out, and this could all be a massive story by Thomas Zane. Another thing is that the photo featured on the newspaper in the nursing home basement regarding Thomas Zane, Alan is posing in front of the same home on the back of Return, with the writer's room clearly visible. But there are more similarities between the two. Thomas Zane had a muse, Barbara, who drowned in Cauldron Lake. Alan Wake had a muse, Alice, who was pulled into Cauldron Lake. Thomas Zane had someone obsessed with him in Cynthia Weaver, who was the Lady of Light. Alan Wake had someone obsessed with him in Rose Marigold, who became Lady of the Light. Thomas Zane sacrificed himself for balance. And Alan Wake sacrificed himself for balance too. And then we get Scratch. Perhaps Scratch was so destructive and full of hatred because, unlike Alan and Tom, Scratch didn't have a muse. It's a plausible theory that Thomas Zane, Alan Wake and Scratch are all the same person, just exhibiting different types of personalities. Thomas Zane being the reckless auteur filmmaker, Alan Wake being the rational, kind of level-headed personality, and Scratch being, well, the unhinged and insane personality. If Scratch is Alan Wake and Wake is Thomas Zane, then Zane is also Scratch. It is also heavily implied in both games that Mr. Scratch was a creation of Thomas Zane due to the balance in the dark place. Alan was needed there in the dark place, and Scratch was a gift to Alan. It wasn't much of a gift, though. In Zane's words, your friends will meet him when you're gone. I'm not entirely sure as to why Thomas Zane was so terrified of Jesse Faden when he saw it on the TV in the hotel, but it's likely because of their line of work, containing powerful entities. There's a lot more to Thomas Zane than we know. Alright, so to finish, I'll speak about Barry. And what happened to Barry Wheeler? After the Bright Falls Altered World event, Barry Wheeler struggled. He was plagued with nightmares and was on pills which helped him with the nightmares. He was the agent for the old gods of Asgard, but this brought the nightmares back. The old rockers were barely making it through shows and tours, and eventually Barry cancelled the old gods tour. Using proceeds from their greatest hits record, he used the money to build a nursing home, which was the Valhalla nursing home. It was Thomas Zane's old commune. It was refitted and converted into the nursing home, and Tor and Odin, unfortunately their guitar player passed away, would live there. Finally, some rest. Well, they still pounded bottles of Anderson Farm moonshine like no tomorrow. Barry left them to it, returned to New York, and he kept in touch with Alice. They became good friends despite not getting on at all when Barry was Alan's agent. Barry started looking after himself and lost a load of weight and joined a cult. No, I know what you're thinking, it wasn't the murderous type, it was the well-being type. The Blessed Wellness Retreat. And this could be the Blessed organization mentioned in Control, an organization under observation by the FBC, an organization they dubbed to be a paracriminal group. It was run by a man named Chester Bless, who was mentioned in Barry's email to Alice. What will come of Barry, I'm not sure. Again, maybe one day we'll see him again. Seeing as the FBC put an arrest order out on anyone associated with the organization, maybe we'll see him that way. But that is it for this video on the story of Alan Wake 2. Well, I hope you didn't...
That's it. Very easy to...
Farm Moon.
1 second. Hello. 1 second, I'll just come. I'll just come back. 1 second. 1 second. all was Alan Wake explained. Now let's play Senua Sacrifice so that we can play Senua Sacrifice 2 when it comes out. गर्मी हो रही है गर्मी गर्मी है गर्मी है गर्मी let's go, let's play Senua Sacrifice. Psychosis people experience. Continue from where we left. Cert is waiting for me.
You can't get through.
How will she get through?
She'll need to find another way.
Truth said, find your own path.
There's always another way.
There's always a way.
Find your own way.
You just have to find it.
I know.
For you. It was never going to be that easy.
He's waiting.
Cert is waiting.
The Northmen tell this story. Before the Earth was created, there was a world called Muspel. Because it was in the south, it was bright and hot, flaming, burning. Sparks that flew out from Muspel became the stars. Other sparks melted ice in the frozen world of Niflheim, creating the body of the first giant, Ymir. Muspel is one of the 9 worlds, and is now the land of the fire giants. And people from elsewhere cannot endure a journey there.
Muspelheim. Second. 1 second. You can go from here, I think. No? Oh. Fire sacrifice. We need a fire sacrifice.
She needs to find it.
Another fire sacrifice.
Another fire sacrifice.
Find the fire, Senua. To follow the path to Surt.
Surt.
It's too far.
She'll never find it. She'll never make her way back.
She needs to remember the way back.
What happens when she finds it?
Everything will burn.
Concentrate on where you're going. She needs to remember the path.
Everything will burn, then how will she find the way back?
She won't. She won't be able to tell.
The Northmen say that the defender of Muspel is called Surt, the foremost of the fire giants. His name means the Black One, because he is like something burnt. The Northmen believe that he sits at the border of Muspel with his flaming sword, and at the end of the world he will leave his post. He will travel to Asgard and Midgard, waging war against all the gods. He will be victorious, and then burn the whole world with fire.
What is that?
The Northmen made fire sacrifices, burning slaves like me to reveal the path to Surt. I searched for meaning in their suffering, in their eyes. But they just screamed like helpless pigs.
My bad. My fault. My fault. मैंने F नहीं दबाया. इसमें आ भी नहीं था कोई दबाने के लिए भाई. What the fuck? जितने आप मरोगे तो रॉट वो होगा. What the fuck? What the hell?
Answer your prayers, Senua. I asked the gods for mercy, all of them, even theirs. None answered. In the end, I set myself free. Defy the gods, Senua! Find your own path, like I find mine!
My gods abandoned me! I am alone.
Zero death. I sacrifice again.
Find the fire, Senua, to follow the path to Surt. The Northmen of Hell worship the Devourers, insatiable gods of darkness. I come from Erin, Senua, where I once followed my own gods, the Tuatha De Danann.
Why did you abandon your gods?
Senua, I was a man of knowledge, not a warrior. To survive, I did things. Bad things. Like you, Senua. The man I once was has died. And when that happens, even gods you worship can die with you.
There's an R nearby.
Northmen believe that the world will be destroyed someday. They call it Ragnarok, the destiny of the gods. Asgard will be attacked by Surt and the fire giants. A monstrous wolf will swallow the sun, and the gods will fight in vain against their enemies. There is nothing they can do to prevent it, but Odin ever seeks knowledge and magic, hoping to find a way to postpone that dark day.
Where the fuck is the harbor? ऐसे ठीक है. मुझे नहीं मिल रहा है. I don't know where. Fuck भाई. What is this? ये तो स्कैम हो गया मेरे साथ. Noted. Noted. आग से नहीं जाना. I understand the rot.
You say your world has collapsed. Good. Let it collapse. And have the courage to shed your tears. Raise your world to the prime!
My world is dead.
Only then, as with a newborn, will you see the world anew.
No, I see nothing now.
See you dead. Not died till now. Crunchy people everywhere. Like crunchy. मार धार करनी पड़ती है.
The Northmen say that at Ragnarok, the sons of Muspel will travel to battle in the ship called Naglfar, the corpse ship. And when the sons of Muspel leave the ship and ride to battle, it will be as though the sky had split open, and Surt will lead them. Wherever he goes, flame will erupt before him, and fires will burn behind him.
Okay. कैसे पाया जाएगा anything here? No, this will do.
Tell me truth. How did you escape your darkness?
Senua, once I found my purpose, I was no longer enslaved to the suffering I had to endure to reach it. Unclouded by fear, I could see it clearly in others. Even my captors feared the fire of Surt. And so, during one raid, I took my chance and ran, knowing that they would not follow. The fool ran into the fire. They left me for dead.
उल्टा है ना उल्टा है.
Maybe they were right to. But here I am. Free.
I'm glad I found you in the wilds. I wouldn't have made it without you.
High five. High five. High five gang. अभी कुछ होगा. ऊपर जाके भी कुछ होगा. Yes, yes. कुछ तो हो गया. कुछ तो क्लू हुआ है. Surtr. Half peak light. Yeah. What the heck? Right. Atrás. Door is open. फायर सैक्रिफाइस वहाँ पे होगा बस वहाँ लग के तो हो गया.
Senua, if I can survive the fire of Surt and escape my darkness, then so can you.
Run through the fire. Keep running. Go on. Nothing will stop. Run, Senua. Run.
Pause back.
Don't. She's dying.
It's
No. Dead as fuck. Crisp as fuck.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This darkness takes everything. Everyone.
Senua, are you sure you want to do this? We can fight this together, side by side.
We always do.
This is my battle. I have to face it alone, away from here.
Where will you go?
I don't know.
For how long?
Well,
I don't know.
that's fucking right. Surtr is gonna die.
I believe in you. You know that. Just promise me that you will come back to me. I want you to say it. I want you to say it.
I promise.
Ghetto.
Spill the blood of Surt.
Oops.
Take his mark, and I will change you from and forever be in your debt.
Oops.
You destroyed everything, everyone, but not me. Fight me now.
Oops. That's a one big guy, bruh. Motherfucker, what the
He's getting stronger. We must stop him. Stop him. Surge is getting stronger.
as fuck. Big guy? Fucking big guy? Dead first try.
For every battle won, a greater battle takes its place. And so it goes. Until we fall. And in the end, we all fall. Even the gods have their time. We still go on. Why?
I made a promise, and I will go to hell to keep
I
it.
die free, knowing you will carry my stories with you. I have fulfilled my quest.
Yes, you have.
When darkness comes, I
vow to guide you in this life and the next to fulfill yours.
Then I will see you in hell.
Be ready to face horror in the eye, as I have, to find your answers, your quest, the truth.
Easy, first try. Zero death. Zero death तो नहीं लेकिन first try. Defeated Surtur in first try.
Druth was a troubled man. Scholar turned slave. They tortured him. Took him with them on their raids. Drove him to madness. Spreading this new form of darkness to new worlds. To my world.
Nice. Let's go back. So very good. अच्छा ही What? मैं ऐसे घूम गया नहीं भाई मैं घूम गया उसके
Senua
पास
saw a deep connection form between the Northmen and the darkness. If his tales of hell were true, then that was the source of it. She learned everything she could from him, until she too could see what he saw.
Go back, let's go back.
Have you ever died before? It's a serious question. When the illusion of self is shattered, you simply cease to be. Though it may not seem that way to others, you know when it is true. You can feel it. A stranger in your own body. An imposter. And nothing is the same ever again. Senua has died before. And she will do so again. You can be sure of that.
She's come this far, she needs to keep going.
Quickly get up!
End it!
End it now!
This is nearly the end. It's not over. It's not over. She can do it. Keep going.
ये वो क्यों नहीं हो रहा है? राइट लेफ्ट ऐसे नहीं क्यों नहीं हो रहा है? रॉट
Behind you!
Get up quick!
एक्चुअली गेम में मुझे चला नहीं आ रहा है तो मुझे अच्छा
won't open. She can't get through. Why not? She can't. Why? She's only done one test. Just one. She's only What's the other test?
The Northmen say that in the beginning there was nothing but darkness. Bitter cold to the north, fiery hot to the south. They say the cold formed ice, which melted.
अभी के लिए इतना ही करते हैं गाइस. रात को लेट्स सी कौन सा गेम खेलते हैं. फोर्टनाइट है फिर ये. फिलहाल के लिए लेट्स लीव इट टिल हेयर एंड या दैट्स इट. कितने घंटे 2.5 घंटे की स्ट्रीम हो गई है. सो इट्स नॉट दैट गुड. ज़्यादा घंटे की होनी चाहिए थी स्ट्रीम आज, लेकिन इतने घंटे की हुई. सो इट्स दैट्स इट for now guys. Thanks so much for watching.